if you find an idea that will simplify the lives of other people, it has a potential. Then it's a lot of work finding if you're the only, typically me in our case, are we the only one who wants this technology or a lot of people needs that? So you have to do market analysis, make sure that your market analysis reflects on the reality. Once you have something that people will like, I think go ahead, start the adventure. It's really great to building your own stuff. There is up and high, up and down, but the up are really high, so it's great.
Welcome back to the Smart Biotech Scientist. If you're just joining us, you're catching part 2 of our enlightening conversation with François Carruzzo, who is the CTO of Bioscibex. In part 1, we explored the foundations of seed train operations and their evolution. Now, we are diving into the exciting world of automation, sensor integration, and how these innovations are making breakthrough treatments more accessible. François shares his unique insights from both startup and big pharma perspectives. Stay tuned. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist Podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brühlmann, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics and market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. Where do you see this going with different cell types? So can you tell us a bit what kind of cells have you tested or are you planning to test, and where potentially would you see limitations with that system?
So as today, I think the only limitation is that the cells need to be in suspension. So typically now we are focusing on the mostly used cells, so CHO and egg. Typically our technology is really similar to the rocking motion bioreactor. Typically this system can handle E. coli cell culture. We are not doing that, but from experiment from this system, it can also accommodate really high demanding in oxygen system. Those rocking motion systems are really known also to be really great for shear stress sensitive cells. So it's also used for cell therapy. So for now we are focusing on CHO, but we know that we can potentially accommodate all type of cells.
That's a good point, the shear stress, because yes, in the cell therapy and also in the gene therapy, we have much more sensitive cells. How does your system compare to your competitors? Is that comparable? Is it better? Does it depend on certain conditions?
It's really similar to the rocking motion system, just with 2 axes. So it's really, in terms of shear stress, it's optimal.
Okay. Now let's talk about the regulatory landscape, because obviously we work in a highly regulated industry. You're developing a new technology, you're a startup, so you have a lot of different moving parts to manage. How do you handle the regulatory aspects, and what are the challenges, and how is your system different to other systems, or where do you see the challenges there when it comes to the regulatory part?
So in terms of regulatory, it's quite straightforward. In fact, to sell a system, we need CE marking. That's the only requirement that we have to sell to a company. But then the company will submit the system and will have to use it in a GMP environment. So we need to make sure that the system is compatible with those requirements. So typically it's the GAMP5 development. So you have to develop the system in a way that it will bring you the real value. You will not be able to modify the value. But I will say it's not like medtech system or a drug. The regulatory part is not such issue for us. It's quite straightforward, comparable to developing a laboratory experiment. But then we have to, for the validation, typically for the validation of the process. Now, before you were having a batch process with one VCD at some points, then you move to higher than VCD. And basically before you had this weight control. And now in our system, we want to have a continuous dilution. So if you have a continuous dilution, if you measure the VCD, it's always the same. So you cannot really measure if the cells can grow well or not. Maybe we will have to think about measuring doubling time depending on how much media was added. But it's quite simple calculation that we can do, but it changes slightly the validation part of the cell expansion, but not at all issue at all.
Now let's change gear and let's focus on your path as an entrepreneur and founder of a startup. As a former colleague at Merck and now also being your advisor at Bioscibex, I have a particular perspective on your journey and also your technology. So I would be curious because that would be very helpful for other startup leaders. You reached out to me seeking advice. Can you tell us a bit why it's such a critical piece of leading and starting a startup, and what time should other startup leaders reach out for advice, and what should they look when they're seeking advice? Like what kind of person or would be a good fit for a startup?
So typically in our case, you as a scientific advisor provide an external perspective on expertise. So it helps to think outside the box, help us to solve issues that we might have and we didn't thought about. So you have someone that has knowledge about the cell culture, has extensive also knowledge about how innovative technology are bringing in the biopharma industry. So it's really helpful. In your case, you had experience in large-scale biomanufacturing, and also you were the manager for process technology innovation. So that was a great fit for us.
So that means what you would advise that, well, obviously it depends on what you need, but it's definitely having an external view, having good industry knowledge, and having expertise in the area, right? These are the three factors you have outlined.
Yeah, and I will add also, when you have to take strategic decision, it's great to involve your scientific advisor, and also they will help you to connect with other experts because they are usually more senior, so they have better network.
And speaking of other experts, well, obviously, yes, an advisor can help you get in contact with other experts or other organizations, but something else you need as a startup is a network or a cluster, contact with universities or innovation hubs and so on. What is your experience there?
So we are based in Switzerland, in Lausanne. Switzerland, there is like a big ecosystem for startup and also a big ecosystem for biopharma. So there is a lot of biopharma around. You have both sometimes meets. I will say that we use all the existing organizations, so incubator, events to meet the people and being able to move forward with our product and bring it to the client.
And now one other piece to that puzzle is the voice of customer, because you're developing a product. And I know from the discussions we have had, you started to reach out to your potential customers early on in the process. What specific benefits have you seen from having conversations with your potential users?
Yeah, I think that's a critical one. We started really, really early having those interaction with the client, even before we had our first prototype in the lab. You need to focus to your client need. Sometimes you will have an opinion, but you notice that when you talk with 10 different people, just one has the same opinion as you. So you have to align with the need of most of your clients. So typically it helps us to focus on that. In our case, it was really helpful to design. So now we have a prototype alpha, which is a prototype that helps us to do the proof of concept. And now we are developing a prototype beta that will be bring client. So it's this new product is really driven by the input from a potential client. And also, it will be a better product than if you were not listening to the client. We are trying to have at least one, usually 2 or 3 times a week, client call just to discuss about product. And also takes a lot of time in biopharma industry to take the decision, look at the product, and then accept to start the trial. We will conduct 3 pilot trial in the next year with our system. So we need to contact them now, or even we had to contact them 6 months ago to be sure that we will have pilot trial with them in 6 months. So the decision process is quite long. So you have to start early on.
Yeah, start early. That's an excellent advice. Start early because it takes time. It takes time to get in front of the right people, and it takes time to finally be able to set the foot into the door. I mean, it just takes time.
Yeah, it's a lot of email, calls, then meetings, and then you have contracts. So it can take some time. I will say minimum time will be 6 months. So yeah, it's great to have started before.
So we have looked at the technical aspects. We have also now covered the entrepreneurial aspect. Let's zoom out in this last part of our interview, because I like your vision statement, and it talks about making breakthrough treatments accessible to all. Now, how does your technology and what you're bringing to the bioprocess industry contribute to that vision?
Our system will simplify the process and reduce the cost. Also reduce the failure rate. Our technology will make biologics manufacturing more cost effective. And that this way we are helping the access for the products to more people. I mean, there is a big trend now that also before biopharma didn't have any pressure on cost because there was no so much competition, but now there is more and more competition, a lot of therapy for multiple more therapy. Also, biosimilar are coming. So that's great. Product will go for less, it will be less expensive. And typically, it's also about production cost.
Yeah, we definitely need that. We have a lot of life-saving therapies that don't reach all the patients because they're too expensive. So yes, we definitely need to be able to cut the manufacturing cost. So François, where do you see the main savings? Would that be from the operational side or the risk reduction, or where do you see the biggest potential with your system?
So it's the lower capital cost. So you need less bioreactor. You don't need a CIP, SIP system, a smaller footprint. You don't need too high classified room. On the operational cost, it's less time for the operator. They can focus on more interesting, challenging activities than just doing the cell transfer. You don't have to, as it's a single-use system, you don't have to validate the cleaning. Also, it's the single-use vessel is way cheaper than usually the stir-tank bioreactor single-use system by a lot. I will say 10 times cheaper.
Wow, that's a lot. That's massive, yes. François, what advice would you give to the smart biotech scientist who's on the fence, who also wants to start a company like you?
Yeah, so really great adventure. I will say if you find an idea that will simplify the lives of other people, it has a potential. Then it's a lot of work finding if you're the only, typically me in our case, are we the only one who wants this technology, or a lot of people needs that? So you have to do market analysis, make sure that your market analysis reflects on the reality. Once you have something that people will like, I think go ahead, start the adventure. It's really great to building your own stuff. There is up and high, up and down, but the up are really high, so it's great. And you learn so much from creating the company, doing network, discussing with a lot of people. You learn a lot. So it's an amazing journey.
Excellent. Thank you very much for this advice. So start the adventure. As we are wrapping up, François, what is the most important takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with today?
Yeah, so I will focus on my product. So seed train expansion is a critical step, but really outdated. Today, with automation on single-use technology, there is a way to really improve the scalability, efficiency of this process that will help to reduce the cost and also long-term vision to reduce the cost of those therapies.
Thank you very much, Francois, for sharing your insights, your passion. Where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can connect on LinkedIn or go on our Bioscibex website, and there is the contact. But on LinkedIn, I'm happy to connect.
So, Smart Biotech Scientist, reach out to Francois. I will leave the links in the show note. And thank you once again, Francois, for being on the show today.
Thank you very much, David, for having me. It was really a nice conversation. Thanks a lot.
And there you have it, my fellow biotech scientist. As we heard from Francois' experience, having the right scientific advisor can be transformative for navigating complex development decisions and regulatory landscapes. Speaking of which, if you're looking for experienced guidance to help shape your bioprocess development strategy, let's talk. As Francois mentioned, early advisory input can make all the difference. I'm offering a free advisory consultation to discuss your specific CMC development challenges and how we might tackle them together. Book your session now at brühlmannconsulting.com. And thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, this is David Brühlmann, reminding you that science may give you headaches, but biologics drug development doesn't have to. Keep making biotech smarter. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist Podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.